Greetings, friends. Today I will talk about the art from the ancient land of Canaan, and I will mostly concentrate on the period before the biblical rise of Abrahamic religion. So, we will be talking about what kind of artifacts and architecture was developed by the ancient Canaanites before the Israelites became popular. So, first we will look at the land of Canaan as it existed in the geography. So, we will have a look at the map here. You can see that Canaan existed on both sides of River Jordan and along the coast of Mediterranean Sea, and it stretched up to the Dead Sea here. And here is Jerusalem, and you can see if this is Jerusalem, then Beersheba would be somewhere here. And so this is the extent of Canaan. Later, the northern part of it became Israel, and the southern part of it was began to be called Judea. But we are not going into that later period. We are concentrating on the land of Canaan in the ancient period. So Canaan was inhabited by the Semitic speaking people in and around Jordan River in 2nd millennium BCE. We'll mostly concentrate on this period, and our main period of inhabitation of Canaan would be Bronze Age. And you can see the periodization of Bronze Age here. Early period stretched from 3500 to 2000 BCE, middle period from 2000 to 1550 BCE, and late Bronze period from 1550 to 1200 BCE. From 1200 BCE onwards, we begin to get the Iron Age artifacts. And this Canaan and the people of Canaan were famous metal workers. So, from the excavated sites of Canaan, we have found many objects which were smelted in copper and also in gold and bronze. And copper was mostly mined at Wadi Fenan, and it was smelted at Beersheba Valley sites. So in the previous slides, I showed you where was Beersheba Valley sites. So which was towards the southern extremity of Canaan region. So that was the region where copper objects were smelted. And then Canaan also had links, trade links with the neighboring kingdoms of Egypt and Assyria and Mesopotamia and also Indus Valley. And they used to trade the artifacts they created along these trade routes, and they used to bring other material which they needed for their survival. So this was the trade composition of the land of Canaan in the ancient period. Now, I told you that Canaanites were great builders of architecture and artifacts. So one of the ancient cities of Canaan was at Lachish, at the modern Tel Dan, and this city was inhabited first by circa 2700 BCE, and there are massive, you can see massive walls around the city. So it was a walled city, and stone path led to the gate of the city, and this was the gate. And so the city was surrounded and protected by massive walls, and gate was also very massive. So this was one of the major cities, and we are left with the ruins of the wall and the main gate. So this is one of the major architectural specimen of ancient Canaan. Apart from this, at Pella in Jordan, we have a temple, ruins of a temple, uh, which was a Canaanite temple. And this was a huge temple which began to be constructed from 2000 BCE, and it kept on being constructed till up to 1600 BCE. And this temple had uh, um, several chambers, and it was surrounded by walls which were erected in various periods, and there were strong pillars. We have found round bases of pillars which were huge in the hall, and there were steps leading to the hall pillar, and then finally you could reach the sanctum sanctorum. And in 1350 there was an earthquake, and then after that it had to be rebuilt. So the temple kept on getting constructed, and it was a huge monument. So most of it was constructed with stone blocks, and also rubbles and other large pieces of stone. So obviously artisans had to cut these stone blocks and polish them and carry them over great distances. And this was a major architectural specimen. Then at Tel Megiddo, we have a gate, which was another city gate, and this was again a massive city gate made with huge boulders of stone. You can see here, parts of these city walls are still remaining, and you can see the large boulders of stone were used to build the city walls. And between the walls, we also have chambers. So soldiers or mercenaries might have stayed in these chambers, and they might have protected the walls. So the ancient cities of Canaan were well protected, and they were huge specimens of architecture, and it required a large amount of labor and artisanry and also mathematical precision to build these types of cities. And uh, these kinds of constructions happened in very ancient period, as you can see from the dates, and still parts of these architectural monuments have survived. Now we will see some of the artifacts as they have emerged through excavations. So one of the major artifacts are Canaanite goddesses figurines. These are terracotta figurines, and also figurines made with other material like ivory and bronze and copper, but mostly terracotta. And scholars think that these goddesses might have been worshipped as fertility goddesses. And like we have from other places in ancient world, these goddesses have their round arms folded in front, and they are carrying some ritual votive objects in their hand, and they have a pedestal flat base, which so that they can be placed on a pedestal for worshipping. Now there is another very interesting interaction between the Canaanites and the ancient Egyptians. From circa 1800 to 1550 BCE, Canaanites began to be settled in the eastern part of Egypt, and they carried their artifacts and their style of carving objects to Egypt. And from 1500 to 1150 BCE, Egyptian rulers gained control over the Canaanite territory, and they had administrative and military presence in Canaan. And as a result of this, the Canaanite artisans began to create objects which were of Egyptian interest, and they were used for worship, and also the style of carving was influenced by the Egyptian art style. So in the next few slides, we will see some of these specimens. Now, in Egypt, people used to regard scarab, that is a beetle, as a sacred living creature, and they used to believe that it was a representation of the solar deity on earth. So they used to worship the scarab or beetle for protection, and they used to carve amulets for in the shape of beetle, and these amulets were worn by the Egyptians. So we have some Canaanite artisans who produced these scarab or amulets, which were mainly used by the Egyptians. And one such scarab amulet is here on this slide. And you can see a lion standing over an alligator and crocodile on this scarab amulet. A lion is representative of royalty and strength, and crocodile is another living being from water, and he represents evil. So this is a symbolic of the ruler vanquishing the evil forces, and, and this is carved on a scarab amulet, which the Egyptians used to wear for protection and for gaining strength and warding off evil. A similar scarab amulet has been found from Canaan. Here again, you can see a lion walking in the walking position, and it is carved on this scarab amulet. So again, this scarab amulet was worn by Egyptian but carved by the Canaanite artisans, and it represents strength and royalty and prosperity. And Egyptians used to wear this type of amulet, which Canaanite artisans used to carve for them. And they used to use steatite for carving these amulet, and green blue glaze was applied to carve the lion figure. So in both the scarab amulets, you have seen that lion is carved in the green color. The influence of Egyptians also shows in the sarcophagi that have been found in Canaanite region. And these sarcophagi have been carved in the anthropomorphic form, that is, in the human form. And they also have a face, human face, in the shape of pharaoh, Egyptian pharaoh, carved on the sarcophagi. And these were used to bury the deceased bodies. And mostly these were used by the Egyptians, but these were carved by the Canaanite artisans. And these are terracotta sarcophagi, and they could also be made with stone and other materials. So we have a lot of these sarcophagi in the Egyptian style, and the faces that are carved on these sarcophagi are carved in the Egyptian pharaoh style. So you can see that these faces have got beard and covering on the head, as uh, as is seen in the sarcophagi of the Egyptian rulers. So this was another Egyptian influence on the Canaanite art. Now Canaanite deities were also carved with Egyptian influences, and this is a smiting god from Canaan, and he is wearing a crown which is carved in the Egyptian style. This is another influence of Egyptian art style on the Canaanite art, and this is made in bronze. So this is an example of bronze carving by the Canaanite artisans. And there is a similar deity who is wearing a tall crown like an Egyptian ruler. And this deity has been carved in the seated position, and it is made with bronze but covered with gold leaf. So this is an example of Canaanite artisans using the skill of metal carving in both bronze and gold. And the art influence, the style influences from Egypt, but the deity was worshipped in Canaan. So this is the type of similar interactions between cultural interactions between Egypt and Canaan. Here you see some amphorae which have been found in Egypt, and but they have been carved by Canaanite artisans, and they are made with Egyptian alabaster, but the style of the amphorae is in the Canaanite style. So when the Canaanite artisans went to Egypt, they carried their style to Egypt, and they were making these objects which were in the Canaanite style, but they were made for the Egyptian audience. In this photo, we see some tiles from Egypt, and they show some Canaanite leaders who were captured by Ramses III, the ruler of Egypt, and he got these tiles carved to commemorate the event. So I told you earlier that the Egypt had later captured Canaanite region, and the administrative and military control of Canaan was under Egypt in the latter part of the second millennium BC. So here you can see some Canaanite leaders who were captured by the Egyptian pharaoh, and he commemorated this by carving their figures on the tile collection of that have been recovered from Egypt. So there was not only a cultural interaction, but Egyptian control of Canaan was also depicted in the art of the region. Now, this is a magical tree, a sacred tree, which the Canaanites used to worship for protection, and it is carved on ivory. So earlier you saw some bronze, copper, and gold specimens, gold leaf carvings, but here you are seeing an ivory specimen. So Canaanite artisans were also skilled in ivory carving, and they used to get this ivory from the elephants from Africa. And this object has a hole at the bottom. And so it is thought that this object could be placed over a holder, and it could be fixed on a holder and maybe worshipped, and some rituals could be offered on it, because the tree that is carved, the coniferous tree that is carved on this ivory steel is sacred to the Canaan region. In this, you are seeing gold leaf and bronze filigreed object carved in the shape of a falcon, and it is again a fine specimen of Canaanite artisans. It shows that Canaanite artisans were skilled in carving objects in all types of materials, in bronze, gold, copper, ivory, and also in terracotta. And their art was very highly evolved, and they were making these objects for Egyptians and for other consumers from other regions with which they traded. And in return, they got grains and clothes and other material which they, other things that they needed for survival. So this was a give and take trade, and the fine art of Canaan played a great role in perpetuating this trade between Canaan, Egypt, Mesopotamia, Assyria, and Indus Valley. So this is an example of how well developed Canaan art was in the ancient period. So I will stop here. In the next session, I will talk about some other topic.